had consecutively called at Kimulpo and Pusan. 46. A formation of 420 sailors, selected from the crews of warships anchored in Kempulo, was immediately dispatched to Seoul, where they served as a temporary counterbalance to the Chinese troops camped at Hazen. 47. Simultaneously, a reinforced brigade of approximately 8,000 troops, the Oshima Composite Brigade, under the command of General Shima Yoshimasa, was also dispatched to Kimulpo by June 27. 48. According to the Japanese, the Chinese government had violated the Convention of Tientsin by not informing the Japanese government of its decision to send troops, but the Chinese claimed that Japan had approved the decision. 41. The Japanese counter by sending an expeditionary force to Korea. The first 400 troops arrived on June 9 en route to Seoul, and 3,000 landed at Incheon on June 12. 49. However, Japanese officials denied any intention to intervene. As a result, the Qing Viceroy Li Hongzhang was lured into believing that Japan would not wage war, but the Japanese were fully prepared to act. 50. The Qing government turned down Japan's suggestion for Japan and China to cooperate to reform the Korean government. When Korea demanded that Japan withdraw its troops from Korea, the Japanese refused. In July 1894, the 8,000 Japanese troops captured the Korean Kingahong and occupied the Gyeongbokgung in Seoul. By July 25 they had replaced the existing Korean government with members of the pro-Japanese faction. 49. Even though Qing forces were already leaving Korea after they found themselves unneeded there, the new pro-Japanese Korean government granted Japan the right to expel Qing forces, and Japan dispatched more troops to Korea. The Qing Empire rejected the new Korean government as illegitimate. Status of the combatants. Japan. Japanese reforms under the Meiji government gave significant priority to the creation of an effective modern national army and navy, especially naval construction. Japan sent numerous military officials abroad for training and evaluation of the relative strengths and tactics of Western armies and navies. Imperial Japanese Navy. Itsukiyuki, Commander-in-Chief of the Japanese Combined Fleet, the French-built Matsushima flagship of the Imperial Japanese Navy during the First Sino-Japanese War. The Imperial Japanese Navy was modeled after the British Royal Navy, 51, at the time the foremost naval power. British advisors were sent to Japan to train the naval establishment, while Japanese students were in turn sent to Britain to study and observe the Royal Navy. Through drilling and tuition by Royal Navy instructors, Japan developed naval officers expert in the arts of gunnery and seamanship. 52. At the start of hostilities, the Imperial Japanese Navy was composed of a fleet of 12 modern warships, the protected cruiser Izumi being added during the war, 8 corvettes, 1 ironclad warship, 26 torpedo boats, and numerous auxiliary forward/armed merchant cruisers and converted liners. During peacetime, the warships of the Imperial Japanese Navy were divided among 3 main naval bases at Yokosuka, Kyo and Sasebo, and following mobilization, the Navy was composed of 5 divisions of seagoing warships and 3 flotillas of torpedo boats, with a 5th being formed at the beginning of hostilities. 53. The Japanese also had a relatively large merchant navy, which at the beginning of 1894 consisted of 288 vessels. Of these, 66 belonged to the Nippon Yusen Kaisha Shipping Company, which received national subsidies from the Japanese government to maintain the vessels for use by the Navy in time of war. As a consequence, the Navy could call on a sufficient number of auxiliaries and transports. 53. Japan did not yet have the resources to acquire battleships and so planned to employ the Jernico doctrine, which favored small fast warships, especially cruisers and torpedo boats, with the offensive capability to destroy larger craft. The Japanese naval leadership on the eve of hostilities was generally cautious and even apprehensive. 54, as the Navy had not yet received the warships ordered in February 1893, particularly the battleships Fuji and Yashima and the protected cruiser Akashi. 55, hence, initiating hostilities at the time was not ideal, and the Navy was far less confident than the Army about the outcome of a war with China. 54, many of Japan's major warships were built in British and French shipyards, 8 British, 3 French and 2 Japanese built, and 16 of the torpedo boats were known to have been built in France and assembled in Japan. Imperial Japanese Army. The Meiji government at first modeled their army after the French army. French advisors had been sent to Japan with 2 military missions, in 1872, 1880 and 1884, in addition to 1 mission under the shogunate. Nationwide conscription was enforced in 1873 and a Western-style conscript army, 56, was established. Military schools and arsenals were also built. In 1886, Japan turned toward the German-Prussian model as the basis for its army, 56, adopting German doctrines and the German military system and organization. In 1885, Clemens Meckel, a German advisor, implemented new measures, such as the reorganization of the command structure into divisions and regiments, the strengthening of army logistics, transportation, and structures, thereby increasing mobility, and the establishment of artillery and engineering regiments as independent commands. It was also an army that was equal to European armed forces in every respect. 56. Japanese troops during the First Sino-Japanese War. On the eve of the outbreak of the war with China, all men between the ages of 17 and 40 years were eligible for conscription, but only those who turned 20 were to be drafted, while those who had turned 17 could volunteer. 56. All men between the ages of 17 and 40, even those who had not received military training or were physically unfit, were considered part of the territorial militia or National Guard, Kokumin. 56. Following the period of active military service, Geniki, which lasted for 3 years, the soldiers became part of the 1st Reserve, UB numbering 92,000 inches 1893, and then the 2nd Reserve, B numbering 106,000 in 1893. All young and able-bodied men who did not receive basic military training due to exceptions, and those conscripts who had not fully met the physical requirements of military service, became 3rd Reserve, Hodge. 56. In time of war, the 1st Reserve, UB, were to be called up first, and they were intended to fill the ranks of the regular army units. Next to be called up were the KB Reserve, who were to be either used to further fill in the ranks of line units or to be formed into new ones. The Hodge Reserve members were to be called up only in exceptional circumstances, and the Territorial Militia or National Guard would only be called up in case of an immediate enemy attack on or invasion of Japan. 56. The country was divided into 6 military districts. Headquarters Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya, Sendai, Hiroshima and Kumamoto, with each being a recruitment area for a square infantry.
Yes, I need a break because it's very hot in my living room. And it's been very hot in the weekends. And I don't understand all this. There's too many names and numbers, but I like to read it anyway. I like to make a Danish video now because this text is just going on forever, like hours and hours and hours. So I need to take a break and charging this camcorder. No, it's like 30 degrees always in my apartment, and in the weekend was 32. So I'm just reading this. I need a break because I not understand this text. I don't know. I like to read about this war, but they have not mentioned this war yet. This Russo-Japanese war. But maybe they start to write about it later. But I don't understand why they're writing all this, because I just like to read about this war. But I had to charge my camcorder a bit.